And we saw that Birkenau was just a disaster, and there was
You had appel there every day?
every day, and the appel was not held in a one large place. It was held right in front of the barracks, and in the underneath the barracks. That's where all the sewage from the nearby latrine, which nobody could use because it was so filthy, and so we were standing in muck. We were really standing in muck for hours and hours. And most of the time, the hours were needed so that the Stubenälteste could get the barracks, her place of the barracks, cleaned out. She didn't care. There was nothing to clean in our part because we were sleeping on boards. There were no mattresses or blankets or anything else. We were just sleeping on boards, and the boards were full of lice and other crawlies, termites. I don't know what, but we were overrun in no time at all, and cleaning was a big problem. And then I have to insert here that in all of the camps my mother insisted that we keep clean. And in Plaszow this was so difficult, but she didn't care. At night when I was finished with my rounds, having seen my little brother and gone and given food to my big brother. By the way, my little brother, I had a toothbrush that we had bought for something for bread, and I would give it to him through the hole in the latrine. There was a latrine that men and women were on two sides of a wall, and in this wall there was like a wood hole. It was not a large hole. So I would give him the toothbrush for him to brush his teeth, and then he would have to, and he always wanted to keep it in order to trade it, because it had value. So I would withhold from him the food until he gave me back the toothbrush, and then I would give him the food. And I did the same thing with his clothes, because his clothes were overrun with lice. And I would take a change and give him the fresh clothes, and then he used to carry on. He didn't want to strip, because he says I can see him through the through the hole. And it was a battle royal, but okay, we got through it. And I wouldn't give him the food until he brushed his teeth and until he changed his underwear, and I would take it. And then the last thing that I did, my mother insisted I bring back a pail of water. Now there was only one place where there, first of all, was a pail. There were pails in the kitchen, and going into the kitchen was impossible.
That's now Birkenau you're talking about?
No, I'm now talking already in Plaszow. So what I used to do is there was a place where the kapos showered, where all the people in charge used to shower. And when they were all under the shower, I would put my pail under one shower, you know. I wouldn't get undressed because I was afraid I'd have to run out in the middle. And I would just shower over my striped suit, because it would dry, but at least it was something, and wash my hair. And then take the pail with the clean water and make my way back up the hill to the barracks. And then my mother would arrange, there was a certain seder to it. The first water we took to wash our teeth and our face. And then she would take some water to wash the hair. And then we would wash our bodies, and then we would wash our clothes. And when we were finished, the rest of the barrack used that water and then I had to make sure that the pail was back where I took it from, which was from the shower room of the kapos. And this was very dangerous, because by that time it was very late at night, and to scoot with a pail across the camp, what are you going to say if somebody catches you, you know? I was caught a few times, but I was able to squeeze out always from under, thank God. Now, Birkenau, the situation was so hopeless. We had no sanitation, we had nothing, and my mother says, you've got to bring water. I said, where am I going to find water, you know? So she says, I don't care, we've got to wash ourselves, because we're going to die of lice if we don't have water. So, you know, she was very determined. So out I went behind the barracks, looking for a shower place where the couples would shower, because I figured that is a good source. Gott hat geholfen, I hear water running. I enter barracks, and sure enough, couples are showering. And I get a pail. I do the same thing. I fill up the pail and I wash myself off, and I overhear a voice that I knew. This was the daughter of a doctor in Radom. His name was Shenderovich. And this was his youngest daughter. She was Marlit's age. And she was telling the story about, she was laughing. She was laughing about what Mengele had done. When we came to Auschwitz, this is true always, because when we left Plaszow, we left with a certain group. But when we arrived in the next camp, it was a whole different group, because they had added trains, they had taken away trains, they had mixed it up, and we were with an entirely different group when we arrived in Birkenau. And right from the beginning, right as we left the train, there was a blonde young woman, very pregnant, who insisted that she has to speak to the Lagerältesten, that she has a letter, that she is carrying the child of a high-ranking German, and that she must be protected. And when they were trying to drag her to the crematoria and so on and so forth, she kept insisting and screaming, and that she has this letter, and she wouldn't get undressed, and she kept insisting that she be treated separately. And when Mengele finally came, she had to wait with the rest of us. When Mengele finally came, the first thing before he came to do the selection, she went over to him and she told him her story. And we all held our breaths, because we were sure he was going to, on the spot, send her to the gas chamber. No, he says, of course, and I know the man, and I think it is such a thoughtful thing that he gave you this letter, and he ordered her to be taken to the Revier in Birkenau, in the Zigeunerlager, and to be given very preferential treatment. Now, it just so happened that the doctor who was in charge of the Revier in that camp was Dr. Shenderovich from Radom, whose daughter is now telling the story. And she was laughing. She says, what did she think she was going to get? And does she really think that somebody is going to treat her with golden gloves? Well, I was able to talk with her and get the whole story. She was admitted, and Mengele left instructions that she be given nourishing food and that she be taken care of very carefully. And she was. And when the time came, he instructed the doctor that he must be there at the delivery. And they did a very careful delivery, and they had the pail there for the afterbirth. And after the baby was born, he inspected the baby. What a beautiful baby. And as they were stitching her up, he put the baby into the pail with the afterbirth and sat down on it. And she kept trying to get up. In the meantime, the nurses were holding her down because they were working on her. So she says, but Dr. Mengele, my baby. Oh, he says, it's a beautiful baby. It's a gorgeous baby. It looks like a German baby. And all this while, he is sitting on top of the pail. And this goes on. She's trying to get up, and he's telling her, you relax, and you have a beautiful baby. Doesn't change the tone. He doesn't get angry. Oh, you have such a beautiful baby. Until, of course, it is too late. At which point, she goes crazy. She goes completely kaput. So he claps his hands. He says, okay, now you can send her out to the
crematorium.
Yeah. And this Shenderovich girl was telling this, and everybody was laughing in this barrack, because they knew what his brutality was. I couldn't hold it in. I just couldn't. I was standing. They didn't know I was there. I had my pail. I had my water, and I could have left there and shot. But I walked over to this girl, to the Shenderovich girl, and I gave her such a slap I says, how heartless can you be that you laugh at the misfortune of a Jewish woman whose baby was killed by Mengele? So she, first of all, she recognized me, and then identified myself in case she didn't recognize me. I says, how could you? You're the daughter of Dr. Shenderovich. He was a very, very well-known doctor in Radom, and during the ghetto, he was in charge of the typhus hospital, of the infectious disease hospital. And he was somebody, you know. I says, how could you become so callous that everybody here laughs at the misfortune of this woman? So she says, what does she think? She's such an idiot. She comes here with her letter. Does she really think that anybody cares? And so on and so forth. Well, anyhow, I managed to get out. She walked me a ways. And not that she regretted it. She just explained. She had no compunction about how she reacted. And I got the water to my mother, and of course we followed the same routine that we always did, and the water was being used all night long by the rest of the barracks. Okay, but even that helped a little bit, but it didn't help enough so that we realized this is just a matter of another selection, and we'll be gone. So one day a SS woman came with this Totenkappo in tow, and had us walk across the center aisle for a selection, and she kept asking every woman whether she was a Schneiderin. So she stopped me, are you a Schneiderin? Of course I said yes, and she had me go on the other side. Then she asked my mother, are you a Schneiderin? So she said, I'm a Korsettmacherin. So she didn't. She had her go on, in other words, on the right side. I went on the left side, she and my sister also.
Your sister went with your mother?
Yeah. She didn't select them for as Schneiderin. And I very soon realized that this seemed to have been a selection, not one of those that goes to the crematoria, because all the girls, all the women on the right-hand side were robust looking and strong looking and young looking and so on and so forth. So she had selected out about 30 and told us to stand in front of the barracks, that she's going someplace else to pick some more, and then she's going to come back to get us. So I said to my mother, I says, what are we going to do now? I says, I think this is a genuine selection. I think that you must come into this group. Oh, she left somebody to guard to make sure nobody came in, but Mutti and my sister and my snuck into this selected group. So then she came back, and she right away recognized them. Right away. She right away zeroed in on my mother, and she says, what are you doing here? I did not pick you. So she said, so I stepped in and I says, this is one of the best corset makers in all of Europe. And my sister, I pointed to her, she's her assistant. And if anybody needs anything done, this is the woman to do it. So she said, I did not pick her. And she starts to hit my mother terribly hit her over the head. So, and then she leaves again to check up on the other group. And I tell my mother, stay here, because I think this is genuine. And we managed to stay, and she left. That's when they took us to be tattooed. See, we had already been in Birkenau, they didn't take us to be tattooed. And the tattooing took place in a barrack that had nothing in it except 3 tables in front. And at each of these tables was a Jewish prisoner woman with the emblem Schreiberin. Anything that having to do with paperwork used to be called Schreiberin. Any secretarial work, any record, anything at all was called either a Schreiber or Schreiberin. And these girls did the tattooing. And we had to line up in 3 rows. And there were about, to each row, there were 3, we were in the usual 5s, but as we got closer to the tables, we were 1 by 1, you know. Now, I wanted to get consecutive numbers. For some reason, I felt that would be a big insurance in staying together if we had consecutive numbers. And I had no idea how the numbers were distributed. We were somewhere in the back of the room, and I couldn't see, and I couldn't ask, and I couldn't figure out whether they were going 1, 2, 3, or each one has its own set of numbers. And so I kept sneaking up towards the front to find out. And they spotted me, you know, there were guards in the room. They spotted me and they started to hit me, and I went back again until I found out that they were going 1, 2, 3. At that point, we stayed together in the same row. I managed to get to the center row, and as we came closer to the table, we spread out 1, 2, 3. This was a lot of effort and very, very dangerous. And so we got the numbers consecutively, but each one was done by a different hand. And we were very lucky that all 3 of these girls must have had either a lot of practice or they had some skill, because we have all 3 of us attractive. They're even. They're on the inside, not here on the outside. And most of all, they are not uneven. One is here and one is there. They're all in a row. And that took skill. So that I was so absorbed by this trying to get consecutive numbers that I didn't really feel the pain of the needles as they were tattooing us. So that was finished. Now we are happy. We're on the transport. We have consecutive numbers, and they tell us they're going to take us to Auschwitz. Take us to Auschwitz means walking from Birkenau to... Now, what we didn't know, you see, the things that you don't know in a camp can kill you. That the selection to Auschwitz, which occurred periodically, whenever Auschwitz came below a certain number, Auschwitz, as I mentioned to you before, always kept its population the same number. When they killed a certain number of people in Auschwitz, they replenished it from other camps, primarily from Birkenau, but not usually from our camp, because our camp was
candidates actually
for the
crematorium.
Exactly. So this was an unusual transport. But the idea that people were going from Birkenau to Auschwitz was big news. And in order to get there, we had to pass several other camps. The camps were contiguous to each other. When you entered a camp, you entered a new administration, a new Lagerälteste, a new Totenkapo, a sauna, a selection. All of this, each camp had its own. And they each supplied bodies to the 5 crematoria that existed in Auschwitz. Now, so as we were walking, we came to another camp, and we were told to go here to strip, and there's a selection. Okay. And again, we were very fortunate that we managed to get through together. I won't go into the details. And in this particular camp, they were performing certain experiments. So they were looking at us as specimens. We got through that, and we got dressed, and we thank God we're still part of the group. In the meantime, they had taken some women off, and they had added others. Mm-hmm. You see,
so the number
should stay the same, but there were people waiting already with protectia in the other camp to join the Auschwitz transport. Now we keep going. We come to another camp, the same thing. Now we come to a third camp, and again the same thing, and now we don't know what they're selecting for. We have no idea. Everybody is beautiful and healthy and young, and where do they... So somebody passed a rumor that they're looking for women that have a birthmark here on the left shoulder. I didn't have a birthmark on the left shoulder. My mother didn't insist it. So we bent down and we found a piece of earth, and we made ourselves birthmarks on the left shoulder, which of course was ridiculous because that's not what they were looking for at all. There was a group of women who were waiting with protectia to join this particular transport. So they took women out of our group and they put other women in. Schon, I think we must have gone through 4 selections before we finally arrived in Auschwitz. And Auschwitz, we again had to undress. We were the cleanest people in the world. We had to again undress, and there I think they gave us new striped suits, different striped suits. I think, I don't remember exactly. But in any case, we got into Auschwitz.
So this whole procedure took you how
A
long?
whole day. Oh, more than a day,
More.
because we left the tattooing room in the forenoon, and we didn't arrive there until the afternoon. So we were walking the whole time, you know, and there was always a lot of light in the sauna in the selection, so we didn't even realize the time because we were so tense trying to figure out how we can stay in the group that's going to go to Auschwitz. And of course we could have been wrong, because the whole thing could have been a hoax. They've done these things. So when we got to Auschwitz, they were there. The people who were in charge were the Schwarzwinklers, the men, the criminals.
Mhm.
And they tried to detain us and to talk to us for their own pleasure. But finally we got out to the room where we were supposed to be taken by the to work, you know, to our workplace. And we're waiting, and suddenly we find ourselves 12 women, and nobody is claiming us.
All the others were already taken
All
from
our
that
others
group.
were already taken, and we are still there, and they had come and they had claimed them, and this guard, the one who had rejected my mother, very deliberately left us standing, because she apparently knew that we had smuggled ourselves onto the transport, and we were left standing. So what are we going to do? I became terribly panicky. This is a very large area, apparently some kind of a reception area in Auschwitz itself, Musterlager. And I'm running to see who is there, what can be done. And I see a SS-man, choleric, screaming, with a real tantrum in German. I mean, he was out of his mind, really. And he keeps screaming that he was promised 7 printers, and nobody came, and he has no printers, and he's screaming. I walk over to him in my calmest German. I says, "Entschuldigen Sie bitte, Obersturmführer." Of course, he wasn't an Obersturmführer. It doesn't matter. You always used to elevate them grade if you want to talk to them. Your printers are waiting. So he says, "Why aren't they here? You know, and who told them to wait there? And what kind of nonsense? Are they so stupid they don't even know where to wait?" I says, "Well, just wait a second. I'll bring them here. Don't go anyplace. They're here." I run back to the girls and I says, "How many of you are printers?" Of course, none. I says, "How many of you have ever seen a printing press?" Nobody. I says, "How many of you know anything about printing?" So one of the girls says, "My uncle had a printing press." I says, "Okay, you're the chief printer." And the other, and her friend, I says, "You're going to be her assistant, and we're all printers. And if you fail me, then we're all going to go to the gas chamber, because we were left behind." So I marched them to this
All 12, yes.
all 12. And he's counting, you know, I says, 7 are printers and the others are assistants. And he says, "Ach, yeah, I needed a paper counter, and I needed a paper cutter, and I needed a packager." Anyhow, he's taking us all, and he's bringing us to this print shop. Downstairs are the actual machines, and upstairs are all the other things. They fold the stuff and ship it and get it ready for shipping. And what did they print there? Almost anything that was a toughest, anything that was any form that they needed. You know, Todesurscheine, death certificates, and registration forms, and anything at all. So he puts the 2 girls, and we found over there a group of Frenchmen who were linotyped. They were doing the setting, and upstairs were some Hungarian men who were doing the work upstairs. The Frenchmen cannot speak to us. They can't communicate. They don't know anything. No Yiddish, no nothing. And the Hungarian men are afraid to talk to us because they think that this is a trap, that if they talk to us, they are going to be sent away. Because in Auschwitz, everybody was so afraid of being taken to the crematoria that they watched their shadow. So I said to the girls, what are we going to do now? Because the capo came down. There was a capo who was in charge under this SS-man, and he expects us to start printing. So she says, I don't know what to do. I says, did you ever see a real automatic printing machine? Did you ever see anything like it? She says, yes, I saw, but I never paid any attention. My uncle had it. So I run over to, when the capo is not looking, I run over to the one of the Frenchmen who looked a little bit more friendly, and I said, would you please work with us in French? So he says, not now. I says, how are we going to get started? So he says, go over and flip the paper back and count paper. Then you know. So the girl whose uncle was a printer, she says, that I know how to do because he used to ask me sometimes to count paper from. So she goes over to that table, and there's a certain movement that you do.
Yeah.
She flips it over and she starts counting. So the SS-man is satisfied that she must know. And the capo is going back upstairs to follow him to see what the others can or cannot do. And then the Frenchman comes and he shows them, what they have to do. Of course, in the beginning it didn't work, but we learned how to print in 15 minutes. We were letter perfect. They put me on a hand printing machine, where each card, it was like a little index card. Each card had to be put in, and then the printing had to be pulled. And another girl was also put on one of those, and the problem with it was that the holders for the cards were rather fragile. If you know what you're doing, you don't ruin them, but we didn't know what we were doing, so we were constantly moving these guard lines for the index cards. So he says, look, I can't fix this for you. I fixed it for you once, and now you have to do it on your own. So we learned how to do it. In 20 minutes, we were a functioning printing team. And that's what you did, in the camps. You learned very, very fast.
And your mother was?
And my mother and my sister were upstairs. They were doing sorting and folding and cutting and counting and whatnot. And she had an even more difficult time because there was a Hungarian man who was in charge of this work, and he wouldn't say one word to her. He wouldn't help her at all. And I don't know what my mother did to finally charm him, so he came over and he showed her once what to do, and that was enough. And then she instructed my sister and the other girls, and that's where we worked. And then I told you that something must have bitten me under my arm, under this arm that I used to use all the time, and it got gangrenous, and I had to go to the Revier and got to know the system over there of how they do experiments with prisoners. And she also, I think I told that before, when she told me to clean the ward before I come back, so that she could lance this gangrenous pussy thing. No, I didn't.
I don't think so.
Well, anyhow, I was working this machine, and as I said, I must have been bitten by something. But in any case, it got very, very painful. So much so that I couldn't move the arm. My mother saw the arm that it had a red stripe down, so she knew it was gangrenous. And it had to be either that or I would die from gangrene, from poisoning. So I went to the Revier, even though Revier is the name for any health station in the camps. And I stood in line, and there was whoops. Okay. I went to the Revier, I stood in line, and there was a Czechoslovak woman in a white coat. I have no idea how much medical education, if any, she had, but she was treating everything. She was pulling teeth, she was injecting, she was doing everything. When it came my turn, she looked at me very, like this, and she says, "Look, I can't do it now. You go and take the pail and clean the wards, the floors in the wards, and come back when I'm all finished. But I want to tell you right now that if you so much as peep when I treat you, I'm going to write you down on the report, and you know what follows." That apparently was the rule, that she had to write down whatever illnesses they were. So I took the pail and I took the schmatte and the scrubber, and I started cleaning the wards. And what I saw in that hospital, they were women. These were all women, and they had come in for whatever they came in, and in the meantime, the so-called doctor, the German doctors, used them for experiments. There were women who had an arm cut off, other women who had a breast cut off, and the others who had thyroid removed. Each bed, these were bunk beds, each bed was a tragedy of, and they were all praising their doctor. Oh, their doctor is so wonderful, because if not for their doctor, they would be sent immediately to the gas chamber. And
what happened with these women afterwards? They weren't sent to the crematorium?
Of course. But they were alive another day. You see, this was the consequence of going for medical help. And then when I was finished with this one ward, there was another room. So I opened it up, and I figured there was another ward, but there was only one girl, one woman, and there was a man sitting next to the bed, and the two of them were crying buckets. Meantime, I'm cleaning the floor, and I'm overhearing their conversation. And it turns out that she is the sister of the girl that was subsequently hanged, one of the three girls that were subsequently hanged for supplying powder for the uprising of the Sonderkommando. The Sonderkommando had to get their powder from someplace. So a lot of it they bought by bribing, but most of it was supplied. Eventually, it had to be taken out of the munitions factories that were in Auschwitz-Musterlager. And in these munition factories, they were in the powder room, only girls worked. And they used to strip them. And they were searched coming and going. And there was no way that they could secrete anything. So what apparently was done is their back teeth were hollowed out. And they were hollowed out by medical people like this woman who was treating patients. And then they would stuff it full of powder. Now the next thing was to get this to the crematoria. So the girls were asked to make friends with Totenkapos from Auschwitz. When the Totenkapo from Auschwitz, who was a really bestial Jew, I mean, he couldn't be a real Jew because he was so awful. But he fell in love with this girl, and he would do anything for her. And while he was with her, she would secrete the powder on him. And when he got with his quota of victims to the crematoria, the Sonderkommando would extract it from. They knew where it was, and they would extract it and accumulate it. And this accumulation went on for quite a while. Everybody cooperated who could. For example, Canada, which was the repository of all the wealth that was collected from the victims in Auschwitz, they would supply money for bribing and buying munition. But with all of that, it was a very, very slow process. And in the fall of 1944, the Sonderkommando realized that they will never accumulate enough to do the job. That's when they simply did what they could do with what they had at hand. And to our muzzle, the crematoria that we were in was damaged. That's why it didn't function. There was one that was completely blown up. but most of them were still functioning after the uprising. However, because it was so limited, the Germans were able to throw out a network of spies and whatnot and gather anybody and everybody who had anything to do with it. Now this Totenkapo was devastated, not because of what she made him do, because he loved her very much for some unexplicable reason. He was devastated that it didn't succeed, that there wasn't enough of a success. And she told him that he is responsible for her sister, that she has a sister and that he's responsible for her. Well, the Germans found out that she has a sister, and the sister was brutally, brutally beaten in order to extract information from her. Now, she did not give information simply because she hadn't any. But she was beaten to the point where she needed to be in the hospital, and they probably wanted her there in order to extract more information and also to blackmail the sister who admitted that what she had done. She's one of the three who very bravely died when I told you that we witnessed it. Well, he kept visiting her. He was a dead man. He knew it. But he kept visiting the sister and bringing her food and bringing her comfort. And when I was cleaning the room, those two were crying together because they knew that the sister was going to be executed, was going to be killed. So with all of this information, I finally saw that the Ärztin, whatever she was finished with her row of patients, and I line up. And I come there, and she looks me straight in the eye. She says, "Did you see enough?" I says, "Yes, I certainly saw enough." She says, "Now I'm going to tell you what I have to do. I have to lance this. You have gangrene, and you're going to have to come more than once. And this is going to be very painful. I cannot give you any kind of medication. You must absolutely not say a peep, not even a peep." She says, "Now it's the end of the day. There's no more noise. And if you say anything, it'll be immediately noted, and you will be taken for one of these experiments." I said, "Don't worry about it." And so she went ahead, and, the pus spurted out, and I didn't say a peep. And she squeezed out as much as she could. Then she put in something to soak up the rest into the wound, which also was not unpainful. And this routine I followed for 4 days. She told me to come back, to take the pail, to clean up the rooms, and so on and so forth, and come back at the end. And for 4 days she did that. And I didn't make a peep. And after that she says, "That's enough. The danger is over. I cannot treat you anymore without putting you on report," and that's it. And I got well. I mean, I have a scar, but that's that. I just tell you this, the circumstances under which people got medical help, because most of the medical help was Min HaShamayim. All of the illnesses that would normally, like typhus and yellow jaundice and hepatitis, we all had that. Water in the lungs, water in the knees. If anybody healed us, it was Hashem, because they didn't. They certainly didn't. Okay, then they took us to the death march.
So how long were you working there?
Until the beginning of January.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. About 2 months or so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the conditions there in the barracks were better than...
infinitely. Not only that, there was a very cute episode. The barber who came, they sent a barber to check our hair. We were told that if one nit is found, that the hair would be totally shaven. And we also knew that there were no shaven heads in Musterlager Auschwitz. That if your head was shaven, you had to leave Musterlager Auschwitz. And leaving Musterlager Auschwitz meant going to the crematoria, because there was no transport going back to Birkenau. You see, this was all a one-way ticket. So we used to check each other's hair because we had no real facilities, but we used to check each other's hair diligently every night. Every night we used to spend a lot of time checking to make sure there are no nits. However, sometime during the first 4 weeks, we were told that a barber is coming into the barracks. Now, he was a Schwarzwinkler. A barber, he wasn't a barber, he was going to check the hair and use the machine on whoever, it wasn't a machine, electric, but the hand thing. So I was terribly afraid of that, because no matter how much you check, how perfect can you be without any real combs or, So when the barber started to check, I started to cut up. I started to say, here comes the barber from Seville, and I made I told the girls, let's sing some songs from the barber of Seville, and I said to him, I would like to have a permanent, and can you give me maybe you can give me a permanent on one side and not on the other. Anyhow, cutting up to distract him, and he apparently enjoyed it. And when it came my turn, he didn't cut my hair, just snipped a little bit, and Marlet's too, and my mother's too. And the next day, the couple from the print shop comes over and gives me a piece of paper with a letter from this barber. It turns out that this barber is the Stubenälteste of his barrack. Mm-hmm. And this couple, our couple, was an extremely greedy man. I don't know what it was that he was in, but his whole interest was to get hold of as much valuables from the Jews as possible. And he did. And he hid it someplace where only this barber knew. So he had to do what the barber told him to do. So the barber wrote that he would like me to write a letter to him, and that if I write him a nice letter, he will cook me some dumplings. So I run up to my mother and I says, look, I don't even know how to write a German letter anymore. It's been so many years. Could you write a letter? So she wrote a very cute letter, very nonchalant, about dumplings and how you cook them, and this recipe and that recipe, and gave it to the couple. He watched me. He says, I want that letter before you leave. So I had to make another trip upstairs to get the letter from my mother. And I have to tell you that to go from the downstairs work area to the upstairs work area was forbidden. But I managed. I got the letter and I gave it to the couple. And the next day he comes with a canteen with dumplings. Anyhow, this started a whole correspondence, and he wanted letters. Now I know why he wanted them, because he realized this was towards the end, and he wanted some Jew to write so that he could say that he was good to Jews. So the letters were very important to him. So when I saw that they were so important, I started to ask for spoon and for fork and for a knife, and clothing he would never send. But he eventually got us 3 spoons we had, and so on. And this went on for quite a while. And in the meantime, we used the bread that we didn't need to eat because we had something else to eat. We used to buy some clothing. It was winter time, and all we really had were the striped suits. So we bought from women who worked in the Kleiderkammer. We bought from them warm dresses to put underneath.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I bought for my sister, I used to call it the Joseph's coat of many colors, a very pretty, very colorful dress with pleats on the bottom, perfect for her size. And that was very important because it kept her warm during the death march, and it also cheered her very much up when she was so despondent. Well, anyhow, all of this finished in the early part of January when they marched us out. I think I told you the conditions of the death march were that we walked among walls of corpses. And to this day, I don't know who cleaned up, in other words, who extracted the valuables from the corpses. Because we were all they told us to take whatever we could, and we were laden with stuff. And some of us had access to good stuff, to gold and so on, and undoubtedly had it with them.
Taken along from Auschwitz?
Taken along. They wanted us to take along. Now,
Who is they?